There we go. Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much, Peter. And then we're going to hand over to Peter, who's going to talk about the development of the standard, why it's important, and really what's available for organisations and getting involved with it. And then we're going to talk about, then we're going to hear from Kate, and Kate is going to talk about more about the implementation of the standard. So how you as an organisation can implement it within your organisation. Okay. So I'm still admitting people frantically. They're all coming in thick and fast. And in a moment, I'm going to have to take a break from that so that I can move my slide on.
If I'm a co-host, I'll just admit people for you. So.
Oh, can you do that? Oh, Peter,
yes,
you're a superstar. Thank you. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Right, that enables me then to get on with some slides. Right, so 45,003. I have to be honest, and Kate, shut your ears at this point. I don't usually get excited about standards, but on this occasion, I am really excited about the release of 45,003. I think it could be a game changer in terms of the fact that it creates a systemic approach to well-being. And we've been now working in this field for about 4.5 years, and that's very rarely what we see. We see people with well-being strategies, but well-being strategies generally made up of a series of interventions as opposed to a systemic approach. So I'm going to just very briefly run through some of the things that we've been seeing, and then I'm going to hand over to Peter. Briefly, this is me. I know lots and lots of you already. I used to run SHP Magazine, Irish Conference, Safety and Health Expo and Barber, and now I run this business. I'm a student of applied positive psychology, but very interestingly, I started off being very, very interested in individual well-being and individual resilience. And as time has gone on, I've become more and more sold on the view that we all operate as part of a system, and that actually just looking after ourselves isn't enough, because if we are looking after our own resilience, but then we're constantly put back into a toxic situation, or we're in a country which doesn't look after us, then we're going to struggle ultimately. So my interest is far more in organisational ideas and constructs now. We work on providing training and strategy support with people. If you're into Facebook, join our Healthy Work group. We've got lots of really interesting conversations there about work, post-pandemic, during lockdown, how it all works. And we work with a range of experts. I'm so happy to have with us here today Kate Field from British Standards and Peter Kelly from the Health and Safety Executive. I don't think either of them need too much introduction, but they're going to tell you about their part in developing this standard as we move on. This has got no official validity. This is my observations of where we've been. Okay, so what I see corporate wellbeing is having developed from and where it's developing to. So first of all, when we first got involved in this, 5 or so years ago, people were talking about. There were generally initiatives that came out of HR. There were things like cycle to work schemes, there were yoga at lunchtimes, there was fruit in the office. They were looking after people's physical well-being from a kind of a benefits perspective. And then for the first 18 months of our existence, all anyone wanted to buy from us was mental health first aid, which is really a peer-to-peer support system. So it's there to support someone that's struggling in your organisation from a peer perspective. It isn't a manager course, though lots of organisations train their managers, train their senior team to become mental health first aiders. We worked with a lot of organisations early doors, saying to them, actually, that isn't a course that your managers should be doing. Your managers need specific manager training, because your manager has the biggest impact on your well-being at work, and they need to understand not only how to be the best person, the best manager they can be, but also they need to understand their legal obligations, which are very different to those of a mental health first aider. Now where we're seeing things move finally, and I am really, really pleased about this development, is finally we're getting work with senior management teams, because really it isn't just selling the concept of well-being to your senior management team. It's all about them understanding that what they do as a business, so what kind of business they create, will have an absolute impact on the well-being of your business. So the HSE and Peter will no doubt talk about a stress risk assessment approach. Generally, when I talk about that to businesses, they say, oh, we don't like the idea of that. We don't like risk assessment. We don't like stress. Those words just upset people. But fundamentally, that is what we need to be developing within organizations, and understanding that what actually you do as a workplace, what you do from the job demands perspective, from the resources perspective, from the perspective of the processes you have in place, the managers, the support, how change is managed, the roles you give people, that is where you will impact your well-being systemically. And that's really where we're hoping, by being involved with senior management teams and helping them to understand that, we're hoping to be able to move much more towards that assessment approach. So understanding what in your organization works really well, what could actually be improved from a stress perspective, and how we can mitigate that. So, and that is much more business focused, because ultimately that's about running a really good business. That's not about mental illness destigmatization. It is about understanding that human beings need the right environment to thrive in, and how can we create those environments. So that's really what we see. And this is a model which comes from Gestalt theory, and it talks about well-being as being a relational concept. So I, as an individual, combined with my manager, combined with my organization, is where well-being sits from our perspective. And Peter might not agree with that, neither might Kate, but that's our perspective. We did a survey in April of organizations, and we established that lots of organizations are now talking about well-being. The board has more conversations about well-being than previously, 66% of people said, and 51% of people said employees have reported more well-being issues to their managers. Lots of people are worried about burnout in the workplace, and more referrals to EAP for mental health issues. But what we also saw is that 40% of wellbeing strategies are being driven by HR and health and safety, and/or health and safety. We also saw that 41% of organisations took on some kind of additional wellbeing training during the pandemic. 66% of organisations are expecting to embrace a more flexible working model moving forward. However, in spite of the fact that 83% of organisations that answered our survey said they had a wellbeing strategy, only 1 in 4 of them, 23% of them, had a senior management team that understood wellbeing. So I don't really know how you can build a strategy which doesn't have your senior management team and your board on board with this concept, but a lot of people seem to have done that. This is where the drivers are coming from, mostly from HR and health and safety. And what we saw was that where HR and health and safety are involved in wellbeing or driving it, more things happen. So there are more initiatives taken on board. However, you're less likely to see the board having been trained if you've got HR and health and safety driving it. That was what our survey showed. Feedback. So if you are really engaged in providing good wellbeing in your organisation, you have to have a feedback loop. That might look like a regular organisational stress risk assessment, and 13% of organisations were involved in doing that. Some were taking feedback from HR and engagement surveys, which are being produced more regularly than they used to be. Some from wellbeing committees, mental health first aiders, but getting that feedback loop in place, what your employees think of you as an organisation, what they like about working for you, what they hate about working for you, is really critical to getting this right. And only 45% of people managers have been trained in understanding their own wellbeing and having wellbeing conversations with their team. And 50% of those have been trained in mental health first aid. So actually, we've got a real issue there in terms of managers being trained. We can help you with all of these things. I'm not going to dwell on it. This isn't a sales pitch. So I'm going to hand over directly to Peter. First and foremost. So I'm going to shut up and have a look at the chat, see if anything interesting been coming in.
Oh, I've been answering some questions and creating a few little time bombs to talk about later. Am I clear? Brilliant. Okay. I'll let people in now. So I'll see if you can check at the moment, there's no one there, so you're all right. Loads of interesting questions in the chat, which we'll address later. Before I do that, what I'm going to talk about is how the 45,003 came about. What I'd really like to talk about, just very briefly, for about 5 or 6 minutes, I'm going to share a screen. This will stop other people's. So I'm going to stop your screen sharing, Heather, so as I do mine. And then I'm just going to run this slide presentation. Okay, so where we find ourselves at the moment, obviously we know about coronavirus and coronavirus is around, but what we've really found happening over the course of the last 18 months is a proliferation of different mental health issues arising, because increasingly, if you think about COVID-19 when it was originally happening, this is a picture from Wuhan. It was actually the nurses working on the first COVID ward, where actually, what I want you to see here is what's everyone doing? They're helping each other out. They're showing compassion, they're showing empathy, they're beginning to realize, what do we do here? How do we get through what we do here? We have to start looking after each other. I think it's a beautiful picture. And because it was within the first week or two of wave one in China, and it just, right at the start of this. Now, one thing what we really know is that people want a normal life. What is a normal life? And we were fairly clear what a normal life was last March. Since then, life has changed, and the way we've done things has changed. Some of us have worked at home for the whole period of time. Others have lost friends and family through this pandemic, and others have lost their jobs. So a normal life is going to be a little bit different than it was before. And one of the things what we'll talk about later is 45,003 was started before the pandemic. But actually the reality is it's delivery now. As we're coming through the multiple waves of this pandemic, I think it's going to be a really useful document, because if we look at the way people's mental health react during pandemics and that, this is a chart that's taken from Special Forces training. It looks at levels of distress as soldiers go into conflict zones. Okay, but it's a really useful illustration also of showing what happens as you go into a pandemic. Now, there's a book by Stephen Taylor, which is called The Psychology of Pandemics. I can't see myself here, but hopefully you can see it. And he predicted actually there would be this increase in mental health. And this is like actually a green book of what happens psychologically in a pandemic. Stephen Taylor, The Psychology of Pandemics, a really interesting read, probably because I'm a geek, I enjoy that sort of stuff. But let me draw two things out. The line that you see where we see the first spike is gradual. That's the start of the first wave of the pandemic. So people are not sure what's coming, but they think, surely it's going to be okay. We'll get through it. We'll be off work for a few weeks. So people begin to have a slow reaction mentally, but then we get to the top of the peak and they drop down to what we call this adapted zone. And we see this in soldiers all the time in conflict. You adapt to the environment you're in. Now, the thing to note is the start of the end of the new challenge and the start of the next is very sudden in terms of that second wave. That's where we are with the mental health. So what we're beginning to see in each subsequent wave is a more marked mental health impact as each time we come out of the wave, because people are going back. And I think holding on to that is consistent with what Stephen Taylor has talked about, is the psychology of adaptation to pandemics. So the normal way we live is going to be very different, because actually we're reacting. So mentally we've been reacting over that period of time. And Morgan Freeman, as we work to find our new normal to help each other stay strong and hopeful, that's what we have to do. We have a new normal. Some of us will not go back into open plan offices for 2 years. We will not have full capacity in open plan offices for at least 2 years. The capacity at the moment in those offices is 30%. Some people will remain working at home. Others will want to work at home and go into the office. So we're going to have a very adapted workforce and adapted way we deal with that. And that's why looking at 45,003 and the principles in there, it helps you to give you a system and a structure around what you need to do to address psychological health within your workplace. All of the course of the pandemic, we've talked about this idea of social distancing. And reality is what we've got is social disconnection. If you're on a Zoom and you're talking and we're doing this webinar, normally I would be stood in front of you on a stage. I'd be able to read you and I'd be able to engage with you, and we'd have some time to connect as humans. Whoops. But actually, social disconnection is what's come out of this pandemic. And that's part of putting in, we have to look at how we reconnect with people in a virtual world and a non-virtual, and how we support people getting back to work. Didn't you love it when the slides won't move on? Oh, because compassion and caring and reaching out is at the heart of how we're going to get through this. Is it not? You know, this is what's got us through the last 15 months, 17 months. But for the next 2 years and beyond, we're going to still need to show those characteristics. And they're really, really important. Because if you're holding people up and getting them through it, as we've done through the pandemic, why stop it now? Why go back to the old way? And that's why, for me, the pandemic is a game changer for health and well-being. You can make a decision to go back to the old ways and fail, or you can make a decision to go in the right ways and support and help people and get through that. And one of the things Kate will talk about later is how the standard, when we were developing it, this came into Dorothy needs to be let in, Heather. How actually support is really, really pivotal. And that's in the original management standards. Look at that, compassion, love, thing. All of these, right? Any negatives in there? And you know what, you can go on a training course to learn compassion, but here's an absolute revelation, right? You're human. And built into you is the ability to have compassion. But we go to work and we go, switch compassion off, because we've got to be something else within the context of work. Rubbish. You have to be compassionate at work. We need empathy and compassion now at work more than we've needed at any stage, and I think that's really important. And we show compassion by actually asking people, connecting with people. And then we show empathy, and then that's what we've done. And the pandemic has made us be compassionate and empathic to people. And I think we need to hold on to those traits there, because for some of us, I've spent the last 20 years saying, be more human in work. Be more human, and your people will work for you, and they'll be there. And what we've tried to do with 45,000 is free is to give you a system that allows you to naturally help these things occur, which is the really important bit, because ultimately we're all in this together, are we not? And that's me doing my stop share, which was, I'm sorry, that was 8 minutes. I do apologize. But if you're going to set up and launch a standard on psychological health and well-being, I have it in front of me. As you can see, I'm one of the lucky ones. They get a copy. If you're going to launch on a standard on psychological health and safety at work, wow, when is the best time to launch it? And ironically, it is now. And I think it does prepare organizations. For too long, all I hear from people is how hard, too hard, can't do. No longer is that a valid reason and a valid argument. You have to do something. At 17.8 million days lost to work-related stress, depression, and anxiety, this is 57% of all sickness, occupational sickness. If this was asbestosis, this would be an absolute national crisis. And it should be that actually people's mental health should be should become a priority. And that's why I believe having a standard that complements the management standards that we've done, or the Total Health in America, the Canadian standards, the Australian standards, helps organizations to go along that process. It's 3 years of my life. It was hard. I've look at that. I used to work did some EU work, so I was used to negotiating, because you really did need to negotiate your positions and that. I'm proud of what we produced here, and it took a lot of time and effort to get there. And I do believe that if you are applying 45,000 free, even just elements of it, you start to make the strategy. And I, as an inspector, need to know two things: are you assessing it? And are you dealing with it? Yeah. And if that is a legal requirement, you are required under the management regs to do a risk assessment for those things that that cause ill health at work, including, not excluding, mental health. You are then required under Reg 5 to put reasonable measures in to manage those those risks that you've identified. And that's enshrined in Section 2 of the Health and Safety Worker Act, which requires you to look after the health and safety of your employees. Okay, not the physical health, because we didn't just write that in. It was health, which includes the physical and psychological health. We have done regulatory activity. We will do regulatory activity if the right cases come through. We have a criteria. You can go on our website. You can have a look at that, and then you can see that. But if I'm gonna come in and ask you, have you done a risk assessment, and you say yes, but then you're also saying, well, actually, I'm also applying this standard, and I put these systems in place, then that makes it harder for me to issue a notice, does it not? Because you're showing to me what you've done and how you've done it. And that's why I wholeheartedly put myself behind this for 3 years, because this is the natural thing for us to do, is to want to reduce work-related stress, depression and anxiety. And I'm tired. I've done this for 20 years. I'm 54. I've got to work till 67. Yeah. And I will not let go of this, because I do not believe that the people's mental health and which is made worse at work cannot be prevented. Because if I didn't, and we had the same attitude, we wouldn't have sort of gone through asbestosis and reduced the amount of people dying from asbestosis, fumes, guardians on machine. You know what I mean? For me, it's an issue, and we should deal. We should deal, and we must deal. And so I'm a little bit passionate, but I guess I do fundamentally believe we should go into work and be made healthy and not made ill. And there is this perception that stress is somehow good for you. Pressure is good for you if it's within the reasons that you can manage. When you have too much pressure, it becomes stress, because stress is the outcome. Stress is, by definition, is a perceived inability to achieve a desired goal in its purest form. In the context of work, if you look at our definition, what it says is that actually work-related stress, those characteristics of work, if not managed and controlled, can lead to people experiencing depression, anxiety, and stress. Remember this: that people go off with depression and anxiety, or go off and are diagnosed with depression and anxiety, will, in most cases, been on that stress journey. Some will go off with stress and show symptoms of depression and anxiety, and then it's too late once they've got a diagnosis. We don't wait for any other health issue, occupational health issue out there. We don't wait until we got the problem. We intervene because we know the potential's there. And so, thank you. Is that my 20 minutes
Don't
up?
worry. No, I mean, there's plenty more time. We've got Kate's going to talk for 25, and I had a couple of questions to ask you. I've just sent a chat to the wrong person. Sorry, Daisy. I was trying to reply to Alex. I think there's a lot of confusion around stress risk assessment, Peter, in that a lot of people think they do it, but they do an individual one. So somebody's struggling and they go to their manager and they say, oh, I'm struggling with stress. And then there's an individual stress risk assessment, which is done with that individual, which is a reactive measure, isn't it? It's basically, you're struggling. What are we going to do about it? And then maybe how are we going to make sure that doesn't happen again? But an organizational or a team stress risk assessment is a proactive measure, which is very different, isn't it?
Yeah, you're required to do an individual assessment because you've got a problem. If you've got a team of 20 people and one person's been struggling, you're still required to do that individual risk assessment. But actually what we're looking at is systemic organizational risk assessments. We're saying if you go across your organization, there are 200 people and there are 10 teams and there's 20 in each team. If one of those teams has, because you've looked at their data, higher rates of sickness absence due to stress, you've got potentially a problem, because if you've got a number of people in there, so you then do 18, let's say, do you do 12 individual risk assessments? No, because actually 12 individual risk assessments is telling you there's something systemically going on in the organization. So what we look for is a systemic risk assessment. What is it that potentially has that could cause you to suffer from stress? And they are broken down into 6 characteristics: high demands, low control, low support, which is demand control support based on Karasek's model. It's been around for 45 years and no one's been able to challenge it. There's been variations on it, which I'll happily talk about in my geeky moments on LinkedIn, but where we look at social support and the types of different social support. High demands, low control, low support. Hands up if you've been in a job with those characteristics. Okay, I can see some of you on a camera, so let's stick your hands up there. This is the interactive bit. Right, okay. So and just, can anyone with categorically say it felt good? Okay, and if you did, you need to come and talk to me. But that is where we're at. High demands, low control,